Back at it. My man Cam from Trash and Stash. How you doing today, Cam?
I'm great. How are you?
It's always the perfect day. We had a real great conversation for the people last time around. Wanted to follow up with insight on cost. It's a really powerful word right now in the economy overall. And cheap hauling, looks inexpensive at checkout until it winds up costing the city tax dollars to pay for cleanup, local programs, spending hundreds of dollars per ton, right? What hidden costs do communities pay when people choose the cheapest junk removal or furniture, etc., option instead of a circular solution like Trash and Stash?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. I think it happens at a couple different levels. For the individual, when you're making a choice based off of price, so who can do it the cheapest. Yeah, our business is in a lot of ways, it's a convenience business. If you wanted to do this work yourself, you could. You could bring things to the dump. You could rent a truck. You could rent a trailer. You can find a recycling center. You can do it piece by piece. So you're paying a lot of it is for convenience for us. And so if you go with a cheap provider, what you may be sacrificing is time. And so if is that guy going to show up? And we hear from a lot of people who will call us. We may not be the cheapest. They've told us they've gone with somebody else. And then they call us back and say, hey, the other guy didn't show up. And he may not show up for a couple of reasons. He may not have the back office support or infrastructure. It just may be a guy in a truck. And so if he's sick, if he gets hung up at work, if he's got a flat tire, then he just may not be able to make it out to you. He may also be making a value decision. And so if he got another phone call to provide service to somebody who's going to pay more, then he may be prioritizing the higher payer over you. And so now you've got a time sensitive project that has been deprioritized because you chose cost. And then he made the same choice. He made the cost decision. And so that's one of the individual effects. I think the other part of it is, if somebody's trying to do it at a low cost, you may not be able to bring in the right amount of help. And so now you're exposing your home to damage because rather than team carrying something heavy down the stairs, he's dragging it down the stairs. And so you might have spent less on your hauling, but you're now paying to patch walls or patch scratch floors. And then the other one, you see it a lot, especially when you're in Facebook groups, I want the cheapest insured person to come out. Insurance is very expensive in our business as a provider. And if you hire somebody who's uninsured to do work in your house, then you're potentially liable if that person gets injured. And so that's, some risk that you're taking on if you choose to hire somebody who's not carrying all the stuff. And it's hard to be the low cost provider when you don't have all that infrastructure in place. So I think that's just the individual effect of making a low cost choice. No guarantee any of those things are going to happen, and you may have a great experience with that provider, but those are at least questions to ask. In our case, when we talk about circularity and B Corp and those sorts of things, and how does it impact the community, it's a much bigger picture because a low cost is things like recycling. Like we hear all the time, I have a recycling bin. I'm pretty sure that the things I put in there don't actually get recycled. And so even if you're hiring a disposal company who's got a recycling triangle on their truck, there's no checks and balances on what they're actually going to do when they get that item in their truck. And so it may go to the dump in a landfill pile. It may go to their backyard and be burned. It may be dumped on the side of the road. And so those are sort of low key things, but that stuff adds up. There's a million layers to it. I mean, we see bandit signs are super popular for people in the trades business. They work. They're effective. If you put a bunch of signs out on street corners, people see them. People make decisions off of them. It's a great way to find visibility. But there's a cost to that. I might be alone in this, but it's litter. You're putting things out in the street that don't belong there, don't necessarily have permission to put out there, and so you're creating litter in the community. You're creating work for somebody. Somebody else has to pick it up for you.
Yeah,
So
illegal dumping is a growing problem per the EPA, right? They're saying that it threatens public health, safety, property values, and even the quality of life. Go ahead and continue with that for us.
yeah, I mean there's some pretty specific rules on how you handle the things that you pick up, and so paint, for example, paint's one of the things we get. It's difficult for people to dispose of. We have to charge a surcharge for it because when we take it to the donation centers, landfill centers, we get charged for it. So we pass that along. There's a tactic where you can put paint cans in a black trash bag, tie it up, and who knows what you do with it. And so that's problematic when you're just trying to compete on cost. And environmentally, it's obviously the wrong way to handle it, and it creates problems and dangers for people working in the landfill and in the dump. So EPA is probably right on that. There's a bunch of weird things that you end up picking up in this line of work, and so you gotta sometimes ask questions, and I don't always know the answer to them. But you get asked it, and you got to do the research before you commit to accepting a job.
Thank you for sharing that with us, because most people aren't aware of what happens to the stuff once it goes out of their hands. And contaminated sediments, flame retardants, and chemicals and landfill runoff, airborne microplastic, all this stuff gets in the water, gets in the sediment, gets indoors, eventually gets in us and other animal life. That's part of the cost of cheap hauling, right? So it's a side effect. So if every homeowner, let's hypothetical real quick. If every homeowner in, let's say, Charlotte, the greater area, including Rock Hill, Fort Mill, was cheap and fast, right? Because we know you can't get all three. We know you can't have cheap, quality, and fast at the same time. So if every homeowner was cheap and fast, over responsible and circular for 1 year, what would that do to landfill capacity, local jobs, and or property value from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. You can't do it all, and so often when we're getting calls, it's how fast, when can you get out here, and what's going to be the cost when you get out here. And we try to stay pretty principled in the way we do our job. So we do all of our sorting on the truck for the most part. We have limited storage capacity, but we do have some storage facilities. But for the most part, we're doing sorting on the job. We're least effective at sorting when we're running fast and trying to squeeze in a bunch of jobs in one day, because we're just running from one job to the next. And so something that maybe should go to the scrapyard gets, it's still will get recycled because we'll bring it to the landfill and leave it in the metal pile. But we're not separating metals out. We're not necessarily bringing things back for resale to donate to our charity partners. We're taking to donation centers and trusting that once they get there, they're doing the right things with them. And so we know when we're trying to run fast, we just become less effective. And so we manage that pretty closely. And we can, if we're doing it on a limited budget, we get even less careful, because you just don't have the manpower, the time, or the margins to be able to run a profitable business. And we're a B Corp, we're not a non-for-profit, so we've got to stay profitable. And we talk about profit in those terms because if we don't stay profitable, then all of the mission things we're trying to do can't get done. And so we've got to keep that focus in place. And that's the differentiation between a business that's working as a force for good rather than a profit. If everybody's making those decisions, if we're just making the most convenient, the cheapest, and the fastest decisions, then it's a multiplier, because you're buying low quality products that are intended for disposal, that have short shelf lives. And so that blows things up. I was just reading your article about the cost of cheap and what does that do for jobs and purchasing decisions. it's these small decisions along the way that um, create really big, you know, multiplied effects, and they're innocent decisions or they're convenient decisions, that sort of trigger a whole group of things that follow.
Yeah, 12.1 million tons of groups of things follow and remains in the material stream. Couches, furniture, landfill hits alone, excuse me, furniture in the landfill alone was estimated at 12.1 million tons as a 2018 baseline. Now that's national. So just imagine um, property values adjacent to landfills minus 13.7% on average, right? So, how does a circular economy actually protect families from those hidden toxins that we mentioned, the microplastics, the air quality issues?
Yep. So the idea behind the circular economy is that the products we buy are used for an extended period of time, and then once you're done using them, they can be reused by somebody else in its same form. And once it can't be used in its same form, it's broken down into the largest parts possible to be reused or recycled, with the idea that nothing ever ends up in a landfill. It just keeps it's a closed loop that, you know, items are used, materials are broken down and reused in the same or different ways. Versus our current model, which is linear, which is the take, make, and dispose, and so things get manufactured, likely for low cost and overseas, shipped over here, used for a very short period of time, and then either are landfill bound or best case, I don't know if it's best case. Alternative case is, you know, donated or put in a shipping container and sent overseas for an idealistic reuse, but in all likelihood an overseas disposal. And so that's the chain we're trying to break. It's not a modern concept. I mean, it feels old fashioned. I was telling my kids at my daughter's softball game this weekend, I'm like, when we were kids playing little league, your team would have 5 or 6 helmets. You'd share them. You hoped you weren't the fourth or fifth batter up, so you got the helmet that actually fits you. And then your uniforms you would give back at the end of the season, and the next year, the next group of kids would be wearing those uniforms. Now, like, and you know, my daughter's travel softball, every kid has their own helmet. They've got 3 uniforms. They've got a practice jersey, and so those are all single-use items, that, you know, are here and don't have any true future value. There's no circularity to it, and you know, it's an example, but it's one where you sit at a softball tournament and you see 30 teams there, all doing the same thing, and this is one softball tournament of millions across the country in that weekend, all doing the same thing, and you can just see how that behavior change from this idea of reuse, to exclusive use is just creates a wake behind it.
Great information. This, I'm glad that you mentioned how, you know, it takes great observation to realize that when you're moving fast, there may be a better way. And I think this post on your Facebook page is great for people to visit to really get a in-depth, concept of what that leads to, because most companies are chasing the minutes. Everything is critical, and it winds up destroying economy, ecology, right? All of the ologies. So what you're doing at Trash and Stash is your clients are actually chasing the meaning, the choice behind everything. And recycling and reuse are economic health multipliers. EPA's recycle, from my notes here, recycling economic information shows approximately 757,000 US jobs and $36.6 billion in wages associated with recycling and reuse activities. So that leads me to the next question for you. When a homeowner or even an apartment renter, right, invest in circular solutions instead of cheap shortcuts, what future benefits are they really buying? Tell people about the jobs, the cleaner air, the higher property values, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of jobs, like I can speak for us. And so right now, our staff consists of a crew who will, pick items up, bring them from your home to wherever they're going to go, whether it's our storage facility, the dump, recycling center, scrapyard. For us to be really effective in, like, if I told our team tomorrow we're going to be zero waste. So like right now we're sitting at 49.67% landfill aversion. We have a 50% target. So we're right on target, running the way we're at. But if we wanted to get to 100% overnight, I was like, what has to change? And the answer is kind of everything. Like we have to change the types of jobs we accept, because we're not in a place where every job can be zero waste. And so if our target is zero waste, then we're going to have to select for jobs that allow for that. But when we do, we're going to have to be able to bring the stuff back to a processing center where decisions can be made. This item is okay for donation. This item is okay for resale. This item isn't either, but we can break it down and we can take the hardware off of this dresser and be able to do some sort of architectural salvage with that. Or mattresses are notoriously difficult to dispose of, and so rather than throwing it in a landfill, can you break that down and recycle the fabric and recycle the metal that's inside of it? So you need people and space to be able to do that. And so for us to be most effective, you've got to have a functioning warehouse, and then you've got to have haulers and people and all sorts of things connected to that. So our team gets a lot bigger, our infrastructure gets a lot bigger to be able to do that at scale. And to talk about scale, I mean, we did so far through the 36th week of the month, we put our hands on 832,000 pounds of material. We've diverted 413 and change thousand pounds. And so we're a small company with 2 trucks and a handful of guys. And if you multiply that times the big name haulers that are out there across the industry, like that's hundreds of thousands and millions of pounds of stuff that can be processed by newly created jobs that are here geographically US based, rather than these things that are just manufactured on repeat overseas. So I guess that's one way to sort of talk about the way that the circular economy can help scale jobs. And you talked about it earlier, like we know that the products we're making are not good for us. The plastics, the chemicals in our clothing, these things they're on our body, we're eating them, we're consuming them, we're wearing them, we're rubbing them on our skin. Like all of these products are not good for our bodies, but then they don't, even when we're done using them, they don't really leave our bodies because they're finding ways back into us through the air or through the ground or through the water. And so just without being political or without being anything other than to say, well, if there's bad stuff, like we shouldn't keep it around. So we should stop making stuff out of bad stuff, and we should find ways to dispose of it that doesn't keep it from leaching back in our bodies in other ways. So, I mean, it's there. We see it, we feel it. There's all sorts of studies out there.
Okay. So the cost management effort actually starts, if I hear you correctly, with the original purchase. And we spoke about that briefly in the last episode, mentioning the IKEA situation, how heirlooms today, IKEA is not going to wind up in an antique store, right? But the heirlooms today aren't measured by brand tags. They're made by design choices. So tell the people what they should look for in that original purchase solid materials, repairable joints, etc., to help gain them entry into the circular economy to begin with.
Yeah, yeah. I think it starts with the consumer or the buying decision, because if you're buying something that's built to last, or buying something that's built to be repaired, or buying something that's built to be repurposed, then you're going to get longer life out of that. You could say it starts before that, because designers need to manufacture materials with the circular concept in mind. But that's probably going to be driven by consumer behavior, because if consumers are buying the things that they know are going to last, then the people who sell those things are going to be more inclined to make them. But I think it's on the appliance side. You can buy the Energy Star stuff because it's designed to operate more efficiently. I think with electronics and appliances, I mean, that's a lot of where we're paying attention to. Um, Technology is moving fast, or at least we're conditioned to believe that technology is moving fast, so that these pieces of equipment don't have a long shelf life. Um, that said, I'm talking to you on my phone. I remember when iPhones came out, you were on a replacement plan where every year you were upgrading phones, because every upgrade brought something new. Now I feel like most people aren't switching phones as frequently as they used to. So maybe there's some progress in that. Maybe that is a perceived slowdown in the technology, or a understanding of the infrastructure that exists around some of that. But it's looking for natural materials, materials that are made, sourced from sustainable sources. Buying secondhand is really a good way to go about it. We talk a lot about donations, but the other side of making donations is buying things from that same source. Even if it's low quality, even if it is, a Walmart desk, it can still be purchased secondhand, and it can last, for the 2 years your kids are in middle school until their tastes change and they move into high school and want something else. And so I think it's understanding that, natural fibers on clothing. Like we wear Patagonia overalls, partly because they're made out of hemp and they're cooler, in terms of temperature wise for us to be working out there. But I can also, if I break a buckle or if I tear them, I can send them back and they'll fix them. And so understanding that, working with companies or products that can be repairable is a big part of it as well.
So we mentioned the benefits of, like you said, the Patagonia overalls, even being able to repair them while they're in the life cycle, and that's clothing. So you can imagine appliances, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we talked about the effects of illegal dumping, and affects the quality of life, public health, property values. But the one thing we didn't mention is trust. What happens to the trust in local businesses and government when cheap junk removal companies cut corners with illegal dumping and other tactics that they may deploy?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is, do what you say you're going to do. And so if somebody is hiring you on the basis of you saying you're going to do something, then you have the responsibility to do that thing. And if for some reason you can't or you don't, then acknowledge that and talk about why that didn't happen this time, or why it can happen. From a system standpoint, we talked about curbside recycling earlier. The trust in that system has been broken a long time ago, because it's done in the dark. You put it in the truck, and you hope it's going to go to the right place. You may not know what the right place is. You may not know if the items you've put in there are even viable or relevant to be going to those places. And that's a problem too, because if we don't talk about what should end up in those bins, then we're creating contamination that's contributing to the idea that these things aren't going to where they're supposed to be because they can't, because they're too far gone. But if now all of a sudden you're saying, well, I don't even know if recycling's going where it's supposed to, you are then you're kind of you're coming from that place of hope. Like you're not really seeing it through to the end. You're not really doing anything other than saying, I've done my part and I've handed off that accountability to somebody else. And whether it happens or not, I don't really care. Like, you're not saying this, but the truth is you don't care because you've done your part. And those systems you can't grow and you can't improve from that because you're already coming from a place of, this isn't working and I can't change it, so I'm doing the best I can. And I think that's kind of a tough position to be in.
Yeah, tough is right. It costs, PCB, illegal dumping incidents cost Charlotte basically over $1.3 million per the Charlotte Observer. And like we said, health, everything else is affected by it. So last question for you today. When we choose circular, right? The circular choices aren't just moral. It's like they're like a time insurance because the landfills are filling up. They got to do a vertical expansion in 2026 for the one in Charlotte. So these things aren't just like forever solutions to begin with. 100,000 tons recyclables annually means there's an effort, but is it enough? So circular economy is really buying us time before landfills overflow, before energy bills spike, climate risk hit harder. Share on that for us.
Yeah, I mean it's funny how like a movie like WALL-E feels pretty real. I guess it's become plausible. We can see that in our future. Yeah, and that's a Pixar movie that came out in I think 2008, so like right before the iPhone hit our hands. But they kind of nailed it. And I mean, Idiocracy, the same thing. Like we know that we're consuming in a way that is outpacing our ability to process the material that we're consuming. And so we've prioritized, I talked about our business being a convenience business. We've prioritized convenience in a way where it's created problems. We like to be a convenience in the other way to solve that problem. But it's buying time because we can't keep up with the pace and with the volume that we're creating these problems with. And it's just become, we talk about it a lot, that we live in a world where you can have McDonald's delivered to your door. I think we've talked about it on this talk or this channel before. You can have things delivered to your door. You don't have to get up. You don't have to put your phone down. You don't have to do anything other than click a button and it shows up. That's got a byproduct of disposal. It's coming with paper, plastic, straws, material. It's being driven in individual cars. It's got its own thing, but it's this concept of convenience, and so the convenience is sort of trumping all of the responsibility part of it. It's we put the responsibility aside in favor of what's easiest, or what allows for that dopamine hit, or whatever else. We're sort of chasing the wrong things, and it's not a sustainable model. And I think we've got to kind of get back to the old ways of just understanding each of us has an impact, and some simple choices in either direction affect the way that impact's going to play out.
Well said. I think what I know is that Trash and Stash is making the right choice, expressing the benefits of the circular economy with economic growth, environmental protection, and community well-being, which granted them their B Corp status, your B Corp status, the first in the nation junk removal, maybe still the only, and the critical choices made for the people. I think it's very well said that they need to reach out to you. There's education programs in the pipeline. There's a lot of services coming, and they just should contact you and speak to you about their questions and how you can help them. Correct?
Yeah, yeah, we really want to talk to people who care about what happens to their stuff. And that comes from two places. Like we talked a lot about the environmental impact or the global impact on the stuff. And so the people who care about that or at least paying attention to that are definitely people that we want to talk to. The other part of this is people who want to honor the stuff that they have. We talk to a lot of people who are like in life transition. So their parents have moved to assisted living or their kids are leaving the house. And so they've got a lot of like their life tied to these things in their home. And they recognize that these things still have value. And so honoring those moments in their life by giving this stuff the opportunity to still exist or for other people to enjoy it and maybe share those experiences are people we want to talk to also. Yeah, and it's a weird emotion that people go through because they feel, we've seen it. Somebody leaves furniture, their mom leaves them furniture. They don't like the furniture doesn't go well in their house, but they definitely don't want it thrown away. But they also don't. So like finding a responsible way to handle that is really the only answer. And so that's not an act out of, like it's not an environmentally motivated act, but it's an act that's motivated or compassion for the people around them. So those are people that are good for us to chat with as well.
Awesome. All right, Cam, I appreciate your time today. What we're going to say to them is investing in circular solutions is the equivalent of protecting the community, our economy, and the environment. Pasha Pablo, Cam, you there? All right, Cam says bye. There's the website. Hold on, he's back. Let's see here. You with us now?
I'm here. Yeah, sorry about
that. Hey, no problem. Technology at its finest, right? So we were just signing off. Cam, say bye to the people.
See ya. Thanks.
All right. Till next time. Pasha Pablo, Cam with Trash the Stash. Enjoy.